Welcome to another episode of the Project Reinvented podcast. I'm your host, Lachlan John McRae. Now, today's episode is not just another story, it's a testament to strength. Jeff Johnston once said, "Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal." On October 4th, 2016, Jeff's world was shattered. He got the news that no parent should bear. His son Seth was found dead in a seedy motel room with fentanyl overdose, only 23. This sparked a profound transformation. Now, Jeff was faced with a pivotal choice: embrace growth or embrace bitterness. He embraced growth, reshaping his purpose towards advocacy, resilience, self-evolution. Now, life threw more challenges. In 2021, Jeff lost his beautiful wife Prudence to alcoholism. Yet his passion intensified. In 2022, the Living Undeterred tour embodies his commitment to finding solutions for mental health and the addiction crisis. Jeff is walking the walk. He's developed a mental wellness app for teens. Today we dive deep into Jeff Johnston's inspirational story. He's a true beacon of hope for those questioning their path, proving that even in the darkest moments, reinvention is possible. Let's welcome Jeff Johnston to the Project Reinvented podcast. Okay, welcome to the Project Reinvented podcast. And do I have a treat for you today? Jeff Johnston here is tell his story and just to raise some awareness about, several things, and addiction being one of them. So welcome to the podcast, Jeff. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, Lachlan, this is great. Just when you reached out to me, I little research on what your project's about your podcast and the type of conversations you like to have. And I said, man, this is, if I could do this every day for the rest of my life, I'd be a lucky man, have these conversations.
Perfect. Jeff, obviously you've been on a pretty, I would say traumatic, but also, it's led to some amazing things that you're doing in the world today. If you don't mind, if you could, explain to the listeners, basically what's happened to you since 2016, and where life took you then and how it's taken you to what you're doing now.
Yeah, I appreciate this platform to have these conversations. And preceding that day, October 4th, 2016, is kind of like how I break my life into two lives of Jeff Johnston. There's before October 6th, 10/4/16, and then afterwards. And so preceding that, let me tell you a little bit about what was going on in my life. At that time, I was 50 years old, and I was running a wealth management firm here in Cedar Rapids that I founded right out of college. So it was an investment company I started right out of school when I was 23. The company's called Premier Investments of Iowa, and I started it with my best friend, Brock Renner. And like any small business owner, we had our ups and downs for a lot of years. And on that particular day at age 50, I'd kind of reached that pinnacle. I struggled for many years in the investment business. I slept in my car, borrowed off relatives, went broke a number of times, fell behind on my taxes, all the stories that you hear about for entrepreneurs. And finally, I kind of reached that summit. I was patting myself on the back every day, happily married, 3 beautiful kids. Seth was our oldest at 23, Ian was 15, and Roman was 13. My beautiful wife, Prudence, who I met, we dated a few years, and we were married 21 years, and I was 50, man. I was there. When you're a young man, you look down the road and you envision where you want to be. And I really felt I had made it and, traveled the world and everything. But what people didn't know is there was some inner demons in our family. There were some things that were, some of our closest friends knew, most didn't. But, our oldest son was struggling with addiction, and it started with an Adderall prescription when he was 15. So we can talk about prescription drugs later, but I think it's important to note that if people ask, where did this start? Because I get that all the time when I speak in schools and stuff is, where do you think this first began? And for me, it was when I took him to the doctor for just attention issues. He was having a problem focusing. But what 15-year-old, male doesn't? I don't know about you, Lachlan, but you were 15. You were a train wreck, probably like me. Millions going on in our minds, thinking about, women constantly, and thinking about sports, and thinking about conquering, and all the man things that you think about when you're 15. And, Seth was no different. But I made a decision to take him to the doctor. And this really came from the teachers telling me at school. His grades were not the best and he was struggling with attention. Took him to the doctor, and lo and behold, there was this diagnosis. There was this label that they gave him, attention deficit disorder. And I kind of chuckled because I have it. And I know you do too, Lachlan. I don't know you very well, but most of us have attention deficit at some spectrum level, either a 10 or a 1. I've had it my whole life. It's never been a problem from a standpoint of, I shouldn't say that. Let me retract that. It has been a problem, but I was been able to manage it most of my life. Well, Seth was given Adderall, and Adderall was this pill that was supposed to exorcise this demon called attention deficit disorder. And we'll come back to this later as I get through kind of where I've settled my advocacy in regards to how we present these situations to kids today. And Adderall was that first little introduction to drugs. And at 15, he was experimenting with alcohol and marijuana like a lot of kids do, 15, 16, 17. And Adderall was something he started abusing. And then when he didn't take it, he had withdrawals. And then he started selling it at school. And I write about all this in my book. So I wrote a book a couple of years ago called This One's for You, An Inspirational Journey Through Addiction, Death, and Meaning. And I write about this in the book that it started innocently, Lachlan, like they all do. None of these things are problems until they become a problem, right? The first time that you shoplift, or the first time that, you drive drunk, these things aren't problems until they become problems. And so Seth was given Adderall, and it just slowly just ballooned. And, what happened over a period of years was we just watched this slow moving train wreck. And, on that fateful day, October 4th, 2016 is when I got that call that every parent dreads, and it's a club that we didn't ask to join and one we can never leave. And on that early morning on October, they found Seth dead in a hotel room in Waterloo, Iowa, in a seedy hotel room, I may add, just like you see in the movies. Needle in his arm, never made it out of his chair. The fentanyl robbed him of the ability to even make it to his bed. And that started my new life. Part of me died that day, and another part of me was born.
That's and when you're talking there, Jeff, my brother died 1 month after Seth, exactly 1 month.
Oh,
exact
man,
same
I'm
thing.
so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and I actually feel quite emotional now thinking about it, because he was found the exact same way, with a needle in his arm. And
how old was he, Lachlan?
He was 25.
Wow, Seth was 23. Yeah.
Yeah, and and it was the exact same death, the exact same way. My father had to receive that phone call. My brother found him, and addiction, has robbed me of my best friend as well. My best friend, he died in 2011. So, I can not understand from my father's point of view, because, but I can understand the pain, and there's other parents out there going through that pain, but it was just, I couldn't believe that it was exactly a month. It was just when you said the date there, and I was, wow. And I read the book, and the book takes you on a journey, which I would advise anybody to read it, and I'll put the link in the description. But it definitely takes you on a journey. But, from that moment there, you could have easily, curled up in a ball and, said, fuck you to the world. But you didn't, you didn't. And that's what
I did for a while. Yeah, I did for a while, Lachlan. And that's something that I don't talk about in the book necessarily, but I do now in my talks. But what happened was that, and I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I think it's important to inject kind of a little bit of context of what actually happened. And the day that Seth died, and I write about it in the book, Lachlan, that sibling bereavement is one of the hardest things for a child, an adolescent, to deal with the rest of their life. And you lost a brother. My two boys lost a brother as well. And later on, I learned that losing a sibling is harder to deal with than losing a parent. Losing a brother or sister is extremely traumatic, and you deal with that the rest of your life. And my other two boys were only 13 and 15, Lachlan. So I knew I had to say something. impactful. And I call these dad moments, or I call them husband moments or son moments, where you get a handful in your whole lifetime, maybe 5 in your whole lifetime, where the words that come out of your mouth will frame and dictate the quality of the rest of the life of the people that you care about. And when we got back from the hotel room, and my wife, you can imagine, was an absolute wreck, my 2 boys came home. Ian was 15. He came home from a golf tournament. They had districts that day. And then Roman was 13. He just wanted to ride his bike, play with his friends. And I had to tell him that his older brother was dead, that he'd never see his older brother again, who they both looked up to. And I sat him on the couch and I said, boys, I have some really bad news. Your older brother's dead. And there was a pause. And then Ian looked up, my middle child, who was 15 at the time, and he said, how'd he die, Dad? Drugs? And you see, he knew, watching this journey we were on, he knew that that's what happened. And so I knew at that point I had to say something impactful. So I cleared my voice and I said, boys, and again, I'm thinking to myself, and you're probably an ex-athlete, and I was as well. This is like a competitive moment for me. So my competitive juices are going now. I'm like, okay, this is it. It's go time. We've got to say something impactful here. And I said, boys, we have one of 2 roads to go down. And this became the living undeterred mindset. This became the context of my talk called Better, Not Bitter. And it became a chapter in my book called The 2 Roads. I said, boys, we have one of 2 roads to go down. We have one road of anger, despair, and hatred, and we'll become alcoholics and addicts ourselves. Or we have a road of inspiration and motivation, and this can be the single greatest moment in our lives to make a difference in the lives of others. I'm on the second road. I ask you to join me. And that's how I said it. And I didn't rehearse it. I didn't want to rehearse it. I wanted to be authentic. I wanted them to see exactly what Dad was going to do, right? Like Super Dad was going to do. But the problem was, and this is where I'm getting to where I want to talk about for a second, for 14 months, it didn't work out that way. For 14 months, my wife and I, that's my son behind me, sorry.
Hey, what one's
my
that?
wife and I, that's Ian, who's the college golfer who I'll talk about a little bit about what he's done for being resilient in the face of all this. He's the one that said, how'd he die, Dad? Drugs. And so for 14 months, a year and a half after Seth died, as my 2 boys were trying to be resilient, I sat home and drank alcohol every single day for 14 months. And what I didn't tell you was that preceding all this, for 34 years, I was a full-blown alcoholic, Lachlan. So I built my investment company up 5-6 days of the week drinking. I was a compulsive gambler as well for 20 years. So I had these things going on in my life that weren't revealed until death came into my life, as an opportunity to become a better person, not a bitter person. And so again, 14 months, I sat and drank and drank and drank and drank. And I never considered ending my life at that point. And I'll say at that point, because I do want to talk about my brush with that. I think it's important for people to hear that very recently I went through that. But anyway, so 14 months drank and I got up to 190 pounds and I was just miserable, Lachlan, just miserable. At the same time, I'm going to schools talking about this. I'm working on my book. I'm thinking about a podcast. So all this, I'm putting this face on as this living undeterred face, but behind the scenes, I was miserable. And then finally, and you probably had these moments too, I call it, they're epiphany moments when you just realize, hey, enough's enough. It's time to man up, as I like to say. And my day was December 24th, 2017. And I just realized that was it. I was done. And I stopped drinking alcohol on that day, primarily to help my wife. I noticed my wife was just deteriorating. So in the middle of all this chaos, my wife and I were heavily drinking, and I noticed her health really deteriorating, like quickly. And I thought on December 24th, 2017, if I stopped, I would be that good husband, that supporting, loving, caring husband. And it worked for me, but it didn't work for her. And on June 29th, 2021, one day after our youngest son Roman's 18th birthday, my wife died of alcoholism at the age of 46. So, yeah, and so she's just a beautiful soul. That's her right here behind me, and that's Seth.
Yeah, there.
She was just a beautiful soul, man. Her name was Prudence, and her parents were hippies, and they named her Prudence after the Beatles song "Dear Prudence." And she was my soulmate, man. And it's still just so raw, but I talk about it every day. You think at some point it wouldn't be, but I embrace the pain anymore. I really do. I really think for me to contribute to society, it isn't just to show people how strong I am, but to show them how vulnerable I can be as a man. And then it's okay to cry. It's okay to get down. It's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to give up for a while. But at the end of the day, you got to get up. You got to pull your pants on, put your shoes on, put that face on. You got to go out and make a difference. And in doing so, you improve your life. So that's just a really short context of the last 7 years of my life. So I'm 57 today, got half my family, but I'm the best place I've ever been in my entire life emotionally right now. And things that I thought were important, like money and status and all that stuff, you realize pretty quickly when two people that you really care about, yeah.
It's emotional, Jeff, it really is. And that's a journey that I don't think many people could come back from and still go out there doing the work that you're doing. And and what I love about what you said about the alcohol, you said you never gave it up, because giving it up would mean that you're having to sacrifice something.
Yeah.
And it's not sacrificing it. And that resonated with me so deeply, because alcohol robbed 30 years of my life. And it was, like you said, I didn't know what was important until the people who were important were taken from me. And you look at life differently, I think, when you have these defining moments. And that was for me. I had 2 young children. I'd been to rehab 3 times. And
wow.
I was not a father, and I had that moment as well where I had to just stop. But that moment it was for me as well. And I don't know if you felt the same, because I didn't give up for other people, or I didn't stop for other people. I just couldn't live the way I was living anymore. And I couldn't take the way I was feeling anymore, because I was feeling sorry for myself. And everyone else around me was hurting also. And I wasn't giving them the support that they needed. And that made me feel worse. So when you're going through all this and you've lost Prudence, how did the boys, how did they react? How did they take that news, and how did they help you deal with that?
It's a good question. So Ian was a golfer, and actually the day Seth died was the day of districts in high school, his sophomore year. And the day his mom died was on a golf tournament his sophomore year in college. So both days he was a sophomore, one in high school, one college, and both were on the day of a golf tournament. And Ian ended up playing Division I college golf at the University of South Dakota. And Ian's advocacy is second to none. If I explained what he has done, and I'll talk a little bit about my other son Roman, but I'm happy you asked about them, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people spend the whole time on me. But this isn't a me story. This is a we story, and I could certainly just turn around and talk to you about your story on your podcast, but I'll have to just get you on mine. How's that?
That sounds good.
But the thing is that, Ian, just right out of the get-go, when Seth died, we sat down, did a GoFundMe account to raise some money for the cost of what we're going through. And in doing so, Ian said, well, why don't I just raise money playing golf? And so that junior year in high school, he dedicated every birdie. And the "this one's for you" idea came from when Ian made a putt for birdie, he would point his putter to the sky and he would say, "This one's for you, brother." I get really, but that's where the title of my book came from, was that metaphor of everything we do is to honor, for us, it's to honor Seth and Prudence. And I'll throw my mom in there. My mom died 4 months after my wife died. So I have a lot of death in a short amount of time. My son, my wife, and my mom. My mom was 89. She was just a beautiful soul. But it just, sometimes when I talk about all this, she gets lost in the shuffle, because moms are supposed to die, but not kids and spouses. So Ian raised a lot of money through golf in high school. And then CBS Sports found out about it, and they came out to our house and did a documentary, and it's on the internet. And Zach Johnston, who was just the Ryder Cup captain from Cedar Rapids here, he narrated about 10-minute long documentary. It's touching. And you got, this kid's a junior in high school, just lost his brother, and he's trying to compete at a high level, and he's raising money and trying to put on a happy face. And behind the scenes, he's having a hard time. And then Ian wins that big national award through the AJGA, which is like the Payne Stewart Award that the PGA Tour gives out, through his advocacy. And he got to be a keynote speaker in Florida at the Rolex All-American Bank to help others. We were getting it back in spades. We were getting it back 10 times. And so I realized that being in service during times of trauma and grief is a very good coping mechanism. A lot better than drinking or doing drugs or sitting in bed feeling sorry for myself. Those are coping mechanisms, sure, but they're not productive ones. And I found through being on the golf course, walking 4 or 5 hours by myself, because my wife was going through, her tough times at that point, and just that solace on the course and the game of golf, and so many metaphors with life. Golf is very similar to the story of life. It's like you tee up on the first hole and you hit out of bounds. You can't quit. You got 4.5 hours that you got to grind it out. Sometimes on the last hole, you get your worst shot of the day, and that's the way it works. And so I learned through golf, and golf became 5 chapters in my book about how golf saved our life. And so Ian started just doing more and more. He went to South Dakota, kept raising money. He won the I don't remember the award, the Courage Award, men's and women's sports. In the whole college, he won the Courage Award. So here's this kid that lost his brother, and then in the middle of this loses his mom, and he keeps going, and he keeps going, and he keeps going. And now he owns Tribute Kicks, which is a resale shoe business here in Iowa. And he's 22, and they're on pace to do $1.2 million of sales. And he's donating 5%, him and his business partner, he's donating 5% of his profits to mental health organizations throughout the area and the community. And there it is again. And it's just, I'm not bragging about Ian. I'm bragging about how anybody can be opportunistic in the face of chaos. And here's this son of mine who I'm learning from. And then my youngest son, Roman, he's got his own things going. He's wrote a song. Matter of fact, on my audiobook, at the very end, there's a song that Roman plays on his ukulele called Open Book. It's about Seth. It's hard to listen to for me. I mean, the lyrics are beautiful. And he wrote that before mom died, but there's something beautiful about this story, Lachlan. I can't explain it because everyone wants to give me sympathy and pity, and I don't want that shit. You can take all your pity and sympathy and you can keep it, but I'll take love, I'll take compassion, I'll take empathy, I'll take strength. My tank gets low many times. I need to get fueled back up. Being on your podcast gives me strength. When I'm done today, I'll dive back into my projects and my initiatives with a little bit of extra, shot of adrenaline. But I'm just telling everybody out there listening to this, you really have two choices. You're bitter, you're a victim, or you're better, you're a victor. And it isn't that complicated. It comes down to you making that decision. And if you are drinking, it clouds the ability to make the correct decision for you. Or if you're doing drugs, or if you're stealing or lying or whatever you're doing, it just clouds your ability to be rational in the face of life. And life's not fair, man. You know that. It's your brother's not here. That's not fair. But you seem to embrace it the same way I did. And you have your ups and downs like I do. But I don't think you and I are anything special, right? I mean,
No.
I'm just a guy from Iowa.
And that's the thing about it, though, Jeff. It's, you know, it's not being special. It's being true to who you are, because a lot of the time people aren't being true to who they are for one reason or another, and that's why addiction for me was an escape. But what you said to your boys, you know, was, I think it was, mentally prepare yourself to be strong to deal with the pain and suffering. I think it was something like that, and that just is, that's something like David Goggins would say, you know, and that's you know, because life is not fair. Life is going to throw you curveballs. Life is going to beat you up, but how you respond will determine how your life ends up. We can all sit and play victim, but, you know, bad things can happen to us. But now what? Are you going to let that bad thing dictate the rest of your life? Or are you going to make that bad thing something positive? Just something else you said, poor choices cannot, poor choices cannot cement mistakes if you grow
it's
from
only
them.
cemented as a mistake if you don't learn from it.
You know, and that's it. It's like, we might do things that are wrong, or we might make mistakes, but if we learn from them and we don't make that mistake again, and we become stronger. So, you know, what Roman and Ian are doing is a result, I believe, of how you're guiding them. Because as fathers, you know, our children might fail to listen to us, but they will never fail to emulate us. So, there's times when, you know, you've been down, but you've never gave up. And I think that's an important message to send to our children, because for me, that's certainly the message that I want to show to my children right now are only 7 and 9, but they know that I was an alcoholic and drug addict. They know that I've been to prison. They know everything that they could know without going into too much details, because I want them to see that I've lived that life, so you don't have to live it. Because it's, you know, for me as a father, the most important thing for me is for my children to have the best life. And when you said that to your boys about mentally preparing them, and I've read the whole book, I read the whole book very quickly, and it was an emotional book, but I could identify with so much of the book. And you know, for what you golf for you, you know, that it seemed like it was something that kept the family together, but and it kept you pushing forward, and it was inspirational. And for Ian to win, because he won a number of tournaments, and you know, and that, I don't know if how he deals with the emotion and the pain, but that could be something that's kept him going. And the song by Roman was beautiful. You know, I can tell you where I was listening to it. I was on the flat bench doing dumbbell presses when I was listening to the song, because it was beautiful and it came from the heart. And, you know, and that is for two boys to have lost their mum and their brother, and to be bouncing back and on this journey with you, because this is a journey that you are all on. I've read all your blogs, you know, or listened to them, sorry. And I know you're not looking for sympathy. And I love how the message that you put across is not to please people. It's just coming from you. And you say that in quite a lot of them. This is how I feel. And I think that's so important, that you're being authentic and giving a view from you without caring what people are saying. You know? And that, I think, is very important as a message to be sending to everybody. You know, so yeah.
Well, there's just so much to unpack with all this experience that I've been. That's my dog barking. Sorry.
That's cool. What kind of dog?
He's a Vishla. He doesn't like squirrels. So he sits by the window and barks at it. It's cold here. We got about 5 inches of snow last night, and it's like probably zero degree temperature. So, but I mean, there's so much to unpack with this journey I've been given, this opportunity to be alive. And I'll give you an example about perspective. You know, I learned a lot about Stoicism when I was in college, and I still think Stoicism has become a really anchor in my life. The ancient Greek philosophy, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, all famous Stoics. There seems to be like a resurgence in Stoicism, and I talk a little bit about it in my book. But one of the key parts of Stoicism is a concept called reframing, where you take a situation, and a victim is going to look at it as from that perspective. Things happen to me. Things happen to me. I'm cursed. I'm being punished. Why me? Whereas somebody who's looking at this and reframing it as things happen for me. Why not me? That victor mindset versus the victim. And if you can learn to reframe as you go through life, it just helps you deal with the really bad things that inevitably, if you live long enough, somebody is going to die you care about close. It's just simple math. And sometimes it's not in the order you expect. I want son, wife, mom, and my dad's 90 and still alive. So, I mean, technically he should have passed first, based on men die first and older men, so forth, but didn't work out that way for me. So, reframing is a really big part of what I'm trying to teach my boys and trying to demonstrate for everybody out there that, things are going to happen. What are you going to do about it? It's not that complicated. I mean, I meditate heavily, and I never did before Seth died. I with my attention deficit, there's no way I could sit down and meditate. I do about 45 minutes every morning, Lachlan. And for people that know me, and I started off at 10, went to 15, went to 20, and I realized days that I skipped, I was a lot more apt to get mad when somebody cut me off on the highway. If I was at the store and somebody cut in front of me on the line, I was more likely to let that bother me. I was more likely to read something on social media and get mad if I didn't agree with a political or some type of argument about harm reduction or something about alcohol or 12 steps or whatever it is. When I didn't meditate, I noticed I was a lot more susceptible to the old Jeff Johnston. And so now meditation to me and, my workouts every day, not as intense as yours. I can see you work out hard. But my workouts, I have to for my mental fitness, not really my physical, although I benefit at 57. I feel like I'm 25 most days at 57. But there's a lot about reframing, going back to that. And I think that's benefited me a lot, that death came into my life as an opportunity. Because if it isn't an opportunity, then what the hell is it? It's either something that's going to benefit you, find some way to make your life better, or it's going to be the death and the nail in your coffin. Like it was for my wife. She couldn't find, I'm not trying to throw her under the bus. I feel like they're with me every day anyway, so she knows what I'm saying. But I think she would want me to share these stories to help other women and other men and other sons and daughters. But if you don't find a way, I heard one time someone say, well, don't let this stuff define you. And I'm like, bullshit. That's not true. That is not true. I want this to define me in a good way.
Yeah.
That's the key. It can define me, but it's going to define me in a good way. It's not going to define me in a bad way. So when someone says, well, don't let these events define you, it's like, nah, I don't buy that. I want to be defined by death. I want to be defined by courage. I want to be defined by chaos. And I really feel I'm grateful, man. I really do. I really feel that I was talking to a mom the other day. She lost her son at 13 years old to fentanyl he bought on Snapchat.
Oh my God.
13. Yeah, right. That's the new paradigm in the overdose issue here, especially in the States. I don't know about it in Scotland, but younger kids are dying because they're buying these things on social media. But 13, all right. Seth died at 23, right? I had 10 extra years than she had. That's reframing. I'm lucky I had Seth. See, I could say, well, Seth died at 23. Okay, he got robbed of the years he could have had, 30s and 40s and 50s. And you know this because you read the book, but a lot of people listening don't. But when Seth died, his daughter was born 3 weeks later. So I have a granddaughter. Her name's Brighton. And she's 7 now. But see, if Seth dies at 13, I don't have Brighton in my life. That's reframing. So Seth died at 23. It frickin' sucks. I get it. But he could have died at 13. So my heart goes out to Amanda. But I have to look at his death at 23 as a blessing that it wasn't at 13. And that's the power of reframing.
It's a powerful concept.
It keeps me going because I had 21 years with my wife. Maybe she dies 5 years after we're married of breast cancer or something. I don't even have my children, maybe. So it's like I can pick and choose. We can cherry pick the worst things and we can play that game. And I'm too old for that, man. I got probably 20 really good, healthy years ahead of me, late 70s, let's say. I don't want to waste it being miserable and unhappy and regretful and then sit on my deathbed going, you know what, Lachlan, I wish I would have had a better attitude, a better outlook on life. Because I had this opportunity now to get up in the morning that a lot of people don't. And I don't want to squander it.
No, and exactly, even the research shows if you have an optimistic outlook of your life, you will live longer. And if you're living with purpose, you will live longer. And the reframing thing is so important. And I adopted it before I really knew what it was. Like my best friend who passed away, Mark, he was the closest person to me in the world. Like he was my best friend outside my brother. But if Mark never died, I wouldn't be married to my wife and I wouldn't have my 2 children. Because when he died, I had to leave Glasgow where I lived because I couldn't deal with it. And when I left, I met the woman in my dreams. But if he never died, I wouldn't have left. So what you're saying there is, I never used to look at things like that. But I don't know if it's age or it's, maybe a bit more because I became a bit more spiritual, that I've started to have more gratitude and more awareness about, what's important. And because if I hold on to these things that are pulling me down, they will continue to pull me down. But if I can let them go and look at what I do have and what the future offers me, then I can live a happier existence. So, if you don't mind, could we rewind a bit just to talk about Seth a little bit?
Yeah.
And because I know you don't like using labels, and I don't like using them either, about the ADD and stuff like that. See, before Seth was put on this medication, and this is something because my son's getting tested right now, and I've refused to put him on any medication. And I look at it like you look at it, that it can be a blessing if it's handled in the correct way. So Seth's childhood, was there anything in his childhood which, was traumatic, or anything that he had to go through, in the years up until he was maybe 10, 12 years old?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Seth, he struggled with identity. He loved basketball. He loved music. He was more apt to be a follower per se, where he wasn't just a natural born leader. He probably was within maybe his peer group, but he was a kid that I think had a really difficult time being that person that other people followed. And I think he struggled with that. He played sports, and then when he some other kid did a little bit better, he always kind of found ways to blame it on luck or blame it on something, instead of looking in the mirror and saying, hey, I just got to get better.
Yeah.
He struggled with that at a young age, and his teachers would make comments that, again, going back to attention, or sometimes he was disruptive, but overall, I couldn't have had a better, opportunity to have him in my life. Learned a lot from him. I still learn from him, and what frustrates me the most is that he just wanted to get high. He didn't want to die. And when I see other kids that die from, death is death. You're not coming back. It doesn't matter the cause. But when somebody dies from a car accident or cancer or something else, but then a kid dies of a drug overdose, there's just a different way that people look at that. The stigma that goes with, oh, well, he should have known better. Or, well, another druggie, we don't have to worry about. I mean, people would never say these things to me, but I see posts that people make about other people. And what people don't realize is that perpetuates the stigma. That sets us back, generations in trying to help the ones that haven't died yet. I mean, and so my whole purpose isn't to necessarily just perpetuate the statistics on the problem, but I want to find the solutions. And that's the big reason why we developed our app for young adults, is to focus on empowerment and focus on uplifting them and filling them with love. And, you ask the average kid today, Lachlan, just the average kid around the world, tell us what you think about the future of humanity. And you're going to have 8 out of 10 with some type of negative response. It's going to be, there's chaos all over the world. They're watching all the fights, all the murders, in every, especially here in the States. I mean, the algorithms are just sending these kids these videos that are just constantly bad. And so the average kid is thinking the world is literally on fire. The oceans are destroyed. Climate change is out there. It's all, basically we are like 100 years from not existing. I couldn't be so that could be so further from the truth. There's no better time in human history to be alive right now. Hands down, bar none. Go back any 100-year period of time and just plop yourself down randomly anywhere in the world, and you're going to tell me that you don't have it better. I mean, certainly, statistically, there's some people that are worse off. I get that. But I think for the average person, especially in the United States, that's all I can speak of. The average person in the United States, I think this is a great time to be a kid, but they don't hear it. And they're certainly not being told it by adults, because everything's arguing about politics. Or in the States here, 65% of American adults live paycheck to paycheck, Lachlan. So kids grow up with a very dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship with money, which is one of the number one causes of divorce. So all these mental health issues we see are interrelated. And we have a tendency to focus on the symptoms.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to go back to the cause. And you asked a great question about Seth. And that is how my mind works constantly. Why did he make some of these choices at 15 and 16 when he knew? Every kid knows drugs are bad. There isn't any kid on the planet that thinks drugs are good, because you're not told that by your parents and your grandparents. So I don't think we need to continue telling kids drugs are bad. They know that. We just got to figure out why they still make those choices. And I think it comes down a lot of it to this illusion of autonomy, that illusion of control, that, hey, I'm in control. I thought I was in control of my drinking, Lachlan, until I was 50. Yeah. And I was in control till I wasn't.
Yeah, I agree with you, because if I look at Scott, my brother, I'd already been to rehab. He was well aware of my addiction and my drug use. And Scott grew up with everything, much like probably Seth. He never wanted for anything. He grew up in a beautiful home, a beautiful neighborhood, had everything that he ever wanted. He's seen his bigger brother go to prison, addiction, drugs, alcohol. He witnessed all of that with me. So he knew that it shouldn't be a road that he goes down. But yet he chose to do that. And when you're talking about your app, Jeff, I must say that app is one of the best apps that I've ever seen. Not just for young adults or teenagers, I think for anybody, because there's so much in it there just to keep you accountable. Because I've registered and I've worked my way through it, and because money, it's not just kids who don't know much about money. There's adults right now who don't have a good relationship with money.
Most of them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so it's that app. I think it's very well put together, and I'll put a link in the description for anybody who wants to check it out. But I've registered, I've worked my way through it, and it's great to keep you there to remind you. It pops up every day. There's learnings on there, so just that app alone is a great way to start spreading the word and getting into a routine and making yourself aware of certain things. But it's when we go back to the Seth thing, because this is the questions that I always ask, and I carried a lot of guilt about my brother because I'd came out my second rehab centre, my second time in treatment, and my brother would call me, and I wasn't giving him the time of day because I didn't believe some of the stuff he was telling me. I knew that he was doing drugs and he was drinking, but I didn't believe the amounts, or I didn't believe what he was doing. So
Right.
I would ignore his phone calls and I would not speak to him. And I look back and I don't beat myself up now because that's his journey he chose to take. But for a long time, I thought, could I have done something different?
Yeah.
Could I have,
Yeah.
been a better brother? Could I have, offered him more advice? Did you have any of those thoughts?
It's a great question. I'm not going to lie to you. I still have them. And I think through meditation, I've learned not to try to suppress these thoughts, but what I try not to do is identify too much with them. So there's a big difference between trying to push back a thought and saying, don't think about guilt, don't think about shame. There's another one where you just sit in your grief and you just sit in that moment of shame and it dies. And it's the beauty of the word impermanence. Every worst thing that's ever happened, right before it happened, there was this sense of nothing, right? And then all of a sudden something happens. Well, every bad moment's going to die eventually. Just like it originated from nothing, it goes nowhere as well. And so I've learned through meditation that if I start to feel grief or guilt or shame or anger, I don't fight it, man. It's like my mental health workout. It's like my mental wellness. It's like going to the gym. It's like, it's a lot of times when people go work out, they don't really want to go work out. But when you're done, how many times do you ever feel worse when you work out? How many times do you feel, I'll ask anybody watching your show right now, when's the last time you had a hard cry? And I mean a hard cry and felt worse. It's almost impossible to feel worse after a good cry. So I know this in advance. So if I'm sitting here, we get off the podcast and I'm getting ready for my next thing I have to do. And all of a sudden I just look back and I see Seth and I'm like, oh man, I just miss you so much. I let it go. I let whatever my body needs to tell me. I just let it happen. I don't think we do that enough, especially men, especially young men, where they're still shamed into normalizing something like crying. I mean, what's so shameful about crying, man? I mean, or hugging or telling a man you love them. My dad almost died last summer. I don't think I ever told my dad I ever loved him. I tell him every frickin' day, Dad, I love you. I almost lost him, man. I didn't have that. If he had died, I never would have had that. I would have said, why? Why didn't you tell your dad? Well, we don't do that. Men just don't. We don't do that. And I tell you what, you have an opportunity when somebody almost dies to kind of figure out, hey, I'm never going to do that again. I can't tell Seth that. The last thing I told Seth, and you wrote my book, you know what I said?
Yeah.
I said, Seth, you need to quit drinking alcohol. I turned around, walked in the garage. This was after he got out of prison. Never saw him again. Never got to tell him I loved him. I regret that. But I'm not going to torture myself anymore. Am I going to cry? Oh, God, yeah. I
Yeah, and
welcome it. I think Viktor Frankl said, "Suffering is my opportunity," in Man's Search for Meaning, and that's the best book I've ever read on this whole thing. And it wasn't intended, but it turned out to be a really good book for me for my grief and therapy and all that. But I kind of reworded that into pain is unavoidable, suffering is a choice. And so, you know, when you think about your brother, Lachlan, that pain's unavoidable, man. I mean, it's unavoidable. But the suffering that you attach to that pain, I really believe we have more control over that than we give ourselves credit to. And that's why we don't have to take antidepressants. We don't have to call ourselves depressed. We don't have to talk about all these things that the medical profession wants us to do to keep us sick. We can just say, maybe I'm just very sad.
yeah,
Maybe I'm not depressed. I've never told myself I'm depressed ever. And I guarantee you clinically, I am depressed. I had a gun to my head 2 years ago. I don't talk about that. I sat in my closet the Christmas after my wife died. My mom had just died in November. And that Christmas, I was sitting there and just things got from 0 to 100 instantaneously. I don't share this in the book at all. Well, it didn't happen. It happened after I published the book. And I got the gun to my head, sat in my closet. First time ever in my life I've had suicidal ideation. And it was after Seth's death and after Prudence's death. It's just 2 years ago, man. After my book was out, after all this living undeterred stuff, everyone thought I was Superman. And I counted to 10. I got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. My eyes were closed. And I was at peace. And for people who are watching this, I apologize if I trigger you, but you know what? We need to get past triggering. We need to get past safe rooms. Yep. We need to talk about these damn things. I didn't do it. And there's a lesson in that. And I came out of it better. And I think if people can't relate to my story completely, they certainly can relate to bits and pieces of it. Just like I didn't lose a brother. My 3 are still alive, Lachlan. But I can certainly relate to pieces of your story.
Yeah, and it is. I can't believe you just spoke about this, Jeff, because my last guest that I had recorded earlier today, this is what we were speaking about, having a conversation about suicide. And
I don't talk about it much.
Yeah.
I felt comfortable on your show bringing it up.
I'm so glad that you did, because it's a conversation that has to be spoke about. Like, I had a belt round my neck, must be 6 years ago. But the thing is, I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to feel the pain anymore. And that's what it was.
100%.
And
100%.
It was, I had everything to live for, but I just couldn't deal with the internal
So what made you not do it?
It was my wife who came. I don't think I was going to do it, but it was my wife. And the fact is, I was too much of a coward to go through with it. Because, and my wife came in just, if I wanted to, could have done it in time, maybe not.
Right.
But I was too much of a coward to actually do it. I was on the stairs crying with a belt on my neck, and I was in tears. And then my wife came and she got scared. And then we ended up, I had to go to hospital, which is called the crisis unit here. And I had to go to the hospital to get checked and, to see if I was okay. But they deemed me okay and let me out. But it was just the pain. I just couldn't deal with the pain anymore. So I think what you're
how you worded that is beautiful, Lachlan, because I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to live. It's like the ultimate purgatory. It's like I didn't want to leave all this. I just didn't want to be here. It's like, and I you said cowardly too. I thought about that too. It's like I wasn't, and I know people that are suicide advocates probably are going to kill what you and I just said, but the reality was I was a coward. I was too selfish and not selfless to end my life and leave my 2 boys now without a brother, a mom, and a dad, and then leave little Brighton without a dad, a grandma, and a grandpa. It's like that at 3-second mark, that's what popped in my head. That's why I asked you, why didn't you? I kept having pictures of my kids. And so it goes back to thinking, what happens if I wouldn't have had kids? I know parents that lost their only child. I know a dad that lost his only two boys to overdose, Lachlan.
Yeah.
Chris and Kelly.
Yeah.
He lives in South Carolina. His name's Steve Grant. He's got a book called Don't Forget Me. He's one of the first people I called that when I lost Seth. He lost his only two, man. His only two boys. I'm like, I've got two of my three left. Who the hell am I to feel sorry for myself? This guy is a hero to me. He is in the face of the most unthinkable possible event in a human's life times two. And he doesn't have a backup. He doesn't have somebody else. Roman and Ian get my love every day. I'm so freaking grateful for that. What about Steve and all the parents out there that lost their only kids, man? I don't know how they do that. People wonder how I do it. Shit. I wonder how people like that do it. They are the ones that ought to be hearing their stories told. They helped me through my darkest times, you know?
And after that period where you felt so low, that you had the gun to your head, what changed after that? What did you do? What helped you go from where you were to where you are now?
Well, let me ask a different question to get to the answer to your question. But the question I kept asking myself is, why did I get myself in this place in the first place? Why was I in the closet in my bedroom with my safe open with my Beretta to my head? Why? How could I have got to that spot? Let alone how did I get to this spot on your show? How I got to that spot took some introspection for me. And that's the first thing I started doing when I started thinking, okay, I'm living undeterred. I have a book. I have a podcast. But I sat in my closet with a gun to my head. How the hell did this happen? I wasn't drunk. I wasn't taking pills. And I realized a couple things. One, I'd skipped meditation for about 10 days. So I basically got overconfident that I didn't need meditate. It's like probably an alcoholic that goes to AA meetings that says, I don't need to go anymore. Bullshit. Whatever you're doing, less of it, do more of it, double down. So I took my meditation from 10 minutes up to about 30 to 45 a day. So instead of just being afraid of not doing meditation, I just doubled down, tripled down the time I meditate. 2, I stopped working out. I'm not a huge fitness buff, but I work out maybe an hour to 2 every morning, elliptical, light weights, stretching. That's my workout in my basement here, typically about like 5 in the morning. I like to work out really early. I skipped. So what happened again? Overconfident, Lachlan. Okay. I started eating a little unhealthy, pizza here and there, cheeseburgers, things I never really eat. And that's the only thing I can think of is why my guard went down so quickly. And I sat, just a matter of seconds, I went from living undeterred to sitting in my closet with a gun in my hand. And I had to think, well, how did this happen? Well, those are the 3 things I think of. I got overconfident in my coping mechanisms that were working so well in my life. And like all of us do, it works so well, we stop doing it, right? And I'm telling people right now, not only stop doing it, but keep double downing. Keep doing. So now I get up in the morning and I go downstairs or I'm working out. My son's heading off to school. He looks at me and I said, I don't want to die, Roman. That's why I'm on my elliptical. I don't want to die. And I don't mean die by a heart attack. I mean, die by my own hands.
I know exactly
what scares me a lot more than dying. Yep. So it's all prevention, man. It's all prevention. I'm preventing sitting in that closet. I walk by that closet every morning to get my clothes and I see that spot. I want to put an X right there. I don't mind walking over it, but I'm never going to sit there again. Terrified of ever being back there because I have a feeling if I ever get back there, I don't know if I'll have the courage to not do what I did. And that's not pull that trigger. And so I do every day now, every day. I don't miss a beat, man.
No,
so how I got to here? Well, I doubled down my coping mechanisms and I avoided all toxic things in my life. I don't watch any TV. I go on podcasts like yours, gets me all fired up. I do my podcast. I do my app. I spend time at the store with my son, helping him pedal shoes. And again, it's kind of odd. My wife's been gone 2.5 years and I haven't been on a date. I don't know. I'm not interested. I don't want to be on websites, on online dating. No one's tried to set me up with anybody. And a lot of people lose a spouse to get right back in a relationship, and you see them get married, a year later. And it's like, I want to fall in love with me. I got to be in love with this guy before I'm ever an opportunity to be in love with somebody else. And so am I alone? Yeah, I am alone, but I'm not lonely.
Yeah. I think that's probably such an important thing. What you said there is fall in love with yourself, because for me that was something that I had to do. And like you, there's so many similarities, Jeff. Like, I don't go to the gym to build muscles, even though I do. Like you said, I go to the gym for my mental health. I work
Yep.
out 7 days a week, and people say, "Well, you overtrain." And I said, "Well, I've never
Nope.
overtrained now." I says, "I go because if I don't go, there's a small
Yep.
chance that my changing might think." Meditation. I meditate in the morning and in the evening. I never miss.
Good for you.
Also, like you, I quit alcohol I don't do the meetings, and I don't identify as an alcoholic or anything
I
like
don't
that.
either. Yep.
I stopped, but my coping mechanisms were exactly the same. The gym, meditation, eating healthy, but more importantly, forgiving myself, letting go. Because that was when we spoke about, the feeling guilty about Scott. I let go of all of that. That none of that was my fault. And not just that, but there was so many things in my
Mm.
life that I hated myself for. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to let go of all of that and fall in love with the person I am, because I am actually a very soft, kind, gentle person. But I grew up in an environment where that I couldn't show that to anybody. So I had
Yeah.
to be this, aggressive, alpha, toxic individual. And because I
Yeah.
couldn't do that with my normal personality, who I was, I had to drink to become somebody else, because I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. So for
Hmm.
30 years, I never felt emotion. I didn't know who I was. And then finally, I had to let it all go. And that was the whole, like, speaking to you, that was the whole thing. It was like, how important is it to let go of this guilt, or this hatred towards yourself, or anything that's, because we don't control everything. We can only control ourselves. We can't control other
Mm-hmm.
people, the weather,
Mm-hmm.
nothing. But how important was it for you just to let go of all of that?
It
Those
was very
thoughts.
it was very important. And I think one area of my advocacy is um the word two words actually, expectations and preparation. Those are the two big areas I think for me that dictate most of my waking moments. So expectations. I don't have unrealistic expectations. I just don't anymore. Again, at 57 years old, I'm one phone call away from another death in my life, and so are you. We all
Yeah.
are. It could be me that dies. I tell my boys all the time, be prepared. Dad could die. What are you going to do if I die? So I'm having these conversations with my boys, and trust me, my two boys have. If I died, they've been through a lot. I'm not saying that they wouldn't get over me quickly, but I think they're pretty resilient. I think they would find a way to live in my honor if I died. And again, I always used to tell them this is their competitive advantage. You have a competitive advantage that most of your friends don't have, is that you've been through two of the worst things that anybody can go through. And you've done it as an adolescent, as a young adult. You get fired from a job, or you get a tax bill for $10,000, or somebody breaks up with you. You've went to the funeral of your mom and your brother, man. Nothing
Yeah.
compares to that. So again, I'm using that. I'm reframing it. And then preparation. What are you doing every day for the daily marathon of life? So how are you preparing? Are you getting your sleep? Are you avoiding drugs and alcohol? And I don't mean abstinence, but avoiding it where it becomes a problem. I think you and I would agree. I've bought alcohol for friends. I've had alcohol here over Thanksgiving. We served wine for my family. I'm not
Yeah.
anti-alcohol. I'm anti-alcohol for Jeff Johnston.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I,
My
I,
wife
I know you're in
drinks
a short amount of time, but I think you're probably the same way.
100%, Jeff. My wife still
Yeah.
has a wine. And
Yeah.
I've got alcohol in my house. You know,
Yeah, I
I
do
just know
too.
that alcohol doesn't work for me, and I don't shame
Right.
anybody or say anything negative about it.
Right.
It doesn't work for me, and as long as I'm cool, and if there was ever a moment that I thought that I was going to drink, I would remove that because I would take it
Yeah.
away.
Yep.
But as long as I'm strong within myself, then I'm okay with it around about me, 100%.
But you know something too, again, I don't know you that well, but I think you and I are real similar. But I can almost guarantee you that if you did have a drink, that you wouldn't beat yourself up for the rest of your life that you fell off the wagon. I've told myself this many times that I just don't drink today, and it's going on 7 years now, and I'll worry about tomorrow when I get there. But if I did have a drink, I know one thing for certain. I wouldn't torture myself. I wouldn't beat myself up. I wouldn't go on social media and cry on my cell phone and say, "Oh, I've had 7 years and I, blah blah blah." It's like that's that woe is me. That all I would say is, "Okay, alcohol came into my life as an opportunity to be a better man, not a bitter man. I'm not going to fight it." And I'm trying to teach alcoholics that. And I run up against all the 12-step people and the abstinence people. And it's like, if that works so well, then why would we see the numbers being so bad as they are? Maybe we need to just give ourselves, like you said, forgive yourself. Don't
Yeah.
beat yourself up. You had a drink. You're still here. You can choose not to drink tomorrow. Don't beat yourself. Give yourself some grace. I don't think alcoholics and people that have drugs addictions do that anymore, and they're just so hardwired to everything being abstinence. And I think there's some opportunity we're missing as advocates to talk about grace and forgiveness, and not pain and punishment and repenting and all this stuff. It's like you just chose to drink. That's it. You haven't drank 99.999% of the last 7 years. That's pretty damn good batting average.
Yeah,
Let's
I
don't
agree
put
with you.
100% of the pain on the one moment that you decide. It's not even a weakness. You're human. How's it a weakness? You didn't fail. It's like we just need to we need to shake the apple cart, and we need to look at these differently, because if these things were working the way they were doing them, we wouldn't see every statistic getting worse every single year, every age bracket, every economic demographic, every area of the world. So
And not just
why not
slightly
take a
worse.
chance and try these different perspectives?
Exactly. 'Cause it's not just slightly worse, it's getting significantly worse. The statistics,
Right.
especially when it comes to addiction, they're getting younger.
Right.
It's happening, on a bigger scale with more different types of drugs. You know, kids at 11, 12, 13, they're not vaping, taking hard drugs. So it's like,
Yep.
my biggest thing is for me is to try, how do we get to these kids before it gets to that age? Speaking to them when they're
Yep.
8, 9. And I just watched a great podcast, Rich Roll, and I don't know, it's a guy called Chris who was a basketball player, played for the
Chris
Boston
Herron. I know
Celtics.
Chris. Yeah. Yep.
Yes, yeah, and I listened to his story, and he's going and speaking to the schools, and that's what
Yep.
he's saying. He's saying, it's not, it's about bring yourself to their level and speaking to
Right.
them, because they're not going to understand you at the end of your days. They're going to understand
Right.
you at the beginning. So you need to, bring yourself to their level so that they can understand. Because
Mm-hmm.
why does addiction happen? A lot of it's because of insecurities. For me, it was certainly insecurities. It gave me confidence to speak to girls. It gave me confidence to do things that I couldn't do. The self doubt, the fear.
Right.
I became somebody different when I drank, and I loved it. So at that time, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But when the shit hit the fan, it nearly ruined. It nearly killed me, like literally.
It,
And I
it's
think
always it's always good till it isn't. That's what
yeah,
I tell people. It's always fun and stuff until it isn't. And I watched the same Rich Roll podcast as well, and I met Chris before. Chris has done an amazing job in his advocacy. But you're right; those storytellers that can bring it down to the level of the audience that they're speaking to. Example: what doesn't work is an angry dad coming into a school yelling at kids about the troubles of fentanyl and to avoid drugs at all costs.
no,
That doesn't work. It has not ever worked. It may make me feel good as an advocate to go in there and hit these kids up. Or do I go in and tell them there's no greater time in human history to be you? There's no greater time to be you. Okay? And invest in that love and hope and inspiration like Chris does and so many others do. I know so many other, there's a friend of mine, Rocky Heron. I need to get him on your show. He speaks all around to kids about the same age as Chris does. Yeah, Rocky's awesome. But he's I think he's an ex-DEA or a FBI, but he was heavy in the drug world, arresting people. And I think himself, he had some issues, but nonetheless, he's got a really story narrowed in that niche. But you're right. I think there's an opportunity again with this tremendous drug epidemic we have. We can focus on the supply, go after China, Mexico, throw away drug dealers for 100 years, put them to death, build a high border over Mexico to keep out the drugs. And that's debatable because I think there's a higher percentage of drugs coming across the United States border from U.S. civilians than there are immigrants. I think it's like 80% of the fentanyl busts are not from illegal immigrants. But anyway, or we could focus on demand. We take the demand away.
Yeah, 100%.
What happens to the supply?
And do you think a part of that is getting
and both
them to
are
dream
hard.
again?
Both are very hard. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Do you think it's about getting the kids to dream again, to believe that what they want to accomplish in life is possible? Because I know for me, I was told 100%. That I would amount to nothing. But if you can, this is why I tell my children, I tell them to don't worry about school. You know, you see your maths and stuff like that and your grades. I don't care about that. I care about you exercising your creativity and you being able to use your brain in a creative way and teach them to dream. And I tell them, see, whatever you want to be, if you can visualize it, you can make it happen. And I think that's such for me anyway, I want to push the creativity and get children to start igniting that so they can truly dream again, have a vision of what they want to create. And then that's where we come in, is help nurture that and help them create it, help them build it. And rather than saying you have to go and get a 9 to 5, or you can be a secretary, or you can be this, or you can be that.
Right.
Now, there's always going to be people who want to do that job, but if you were to ask somebody, is that your dream? Probably not.
No, that's mom and dad's dream. But think of this for a minute, and this is a good example of attention deficit because I forgot what I was going to say. But and again, I just don't worry about it anymore. But something in the context of meaning and purpose and empowerment is like, I'm asked by kids a lot. You know, I've got this quote. It's on my first slide of all my presentations. It says, "Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal." It's on the back of my T-shirts and everything. It's kind of my tagline. Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. So so when I talk to kids, I say, and they're like fifth graders, they say, "How many in here have meaning and purpose?" And they're like, "What the hell are you talking about? What's meaning and purpose?" You know, and they shouldn't. They're in fifth grade. How the hell, or seventh grade or ninth grade? How are they going to have meaning and purpose, right? But if you took that phrase, "Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal," and you just reverse order it. So let's do that for a second. And this is an exercise I do with kids. Think of something personal. You lost your brother, Lachlan. Everybody in the audience that is a freshman in high school, let's say, I could say you've got something personal. Maybe your grandpa died of Alzheimer's. Maybe your mom died of breast cancer. Maybe you had a cousin killed by a drunk driver. Maybe, God forbid, you were sexually abused as a child. Something very personal in your life happened. Okay? Immerse yourself with passion. Become an advocate or an advocate or an activist. One of the two. Preferably an advocate. I'm not a big fan of activism. Write a book. Do a podcast. Go to a march. Go to the courthouse. You know, try to get a new bill passed. Run for mayor. You know, run for city council. Okay. Passion. Learn about that topic. It will become your purpose. Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. Find something personal, make it your passion. It'll become your purpose. So that's a nice little exercise I do with kids. Get a piece of paper out, write down something personal, learn about it. Lo and behold, you're going to probably be one hell of a good advocate.
I'm going to use that.
And that's what they need. They need to be They just need to be told that we love them. And you know what? They didn't create this problem, Lachlan. They didn't invent TikTok. They didn't invent, politics. They didn't invent crappy foods that they eat. They didn't invent, sugary energy drinks. They didn't invent vaping. They didn't invent fentanyl.
No.
We did. The adults did. We owe it to them to give them the tools necessary for them to self-assess and autonomously build their own mental health, their own mental wellness. And that's why you do your show. That's why I do mine. It's for the kids. It sounds corny, but I don't think my calling in my life, Lachlan, is to help a 35-year-old housewife quit drinking 3 bottles of Pinot Grigio a night.
No.
That's not my calling. And maybe it's somebody else's, but my calling, my purpose, help kids understand there's no better time to be a kid in the history of humankind.
I so in line with that, and that's what your app is also. That's what the Brighton app also is helps with. I believe is because I'm very much like you, Jeff. It's unbelievable that I feel my calling is to be a guardian for the future generation, to help nurture them and help them. I've actually got a talk where I'm speaking for a charity. I don't know if Bernardo's is called, on Wednesday, and I'm going to use what you just done there with the purpose and passion. So I'm going to
take anything you want, man. Take anything
I'm going
you want.
to use that because it's 16 to 24-year-olds, and it's kids who have had a tough life and they're kind of going down the wrong track. And my whole, before going into it, was all about choice and letting them see that their life is just beginning. Like you said, it's the best time to be alive. So no matter what the circumstances are, they're here. So they have an opportunity to make something of themselves. And it doesn't matter what other people think of them or how they're viewed by anybody else. It's how they view themselves and what they're going to do about it. What action
100%.
are they going to take to make a difference? So it's, I'm pretty sure both of us down this road will cross paths because at the junction at one point, because there's too many similarities. And also, I do believe I've got ADD as well, because I meant to say something to you earlier about the negative visualization. You on one of your blogs, I love it as well. And if you could share a wee bit about that, because I think it's so important to actually do that with people that you love.
It's funny you say that, because there's a very famous in the States here, he's probably globally too, kind of a motivational speaker. He's got 25 books out. He's very well known. I actually read a lot of his books. I follow him and stuff. Well, he made some comment one time on Twitter about negative thoughts and stuff and how they're so toxic and everything. And I said, well, not really. The Stoics have been around longer than you and I have combined, and they practice something called negative visualization. And what that simply would be is, the example, your 2 children. So you walk into the bedroom at night and your kids are sleeping. Okay, Lachlan, it's a beautiful moment. You just look at them sleeping. In just a brief moment, imagine looking at that bed and having it empty. And that afternoon, you went to their funeral. Now, it can be tough, but the Stoics are convinced having that thought, and then you open your eyes and there's your child and you're like, man, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. But there's a lot of people that are looking at an empty bed right now. Yeah. And I'm not one of them. That moment like that is powerful. And I know this guy, him and I went back and forth, and he argued with me a little bit. And I'm like, that's fine. You can sell your books and argue all you want. I'm saying the Stoics practiced this for 2,000 years ago. And there's something in that split second. I'm not talking about sitting there going, worrying about my son dying. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that split second you close your eyes and you think, there's a lot of people right now looking at that bed and it's empty.
Yeah.
But when I open my eyes, my son's right there and I can kiss him on the cheek. I'm so freaking lucky. And all my problems kind of go away. Because you realize that if you opened your eyes and that child wasn't there, you'd have a lot bigger problems than what you have right now, whatever your problems are. Financial, drinking, marriage, whatever.
Yeah.
That's called negative visualization. And I practice it almost daily with my 2 boys. I will literally look at my 2 boys and think, the other day, Roman was sitting there doing his laundry and we were talking about something. And I just looked at him and I just thought, man, imagine looking at this spot and him gone, and And just fleeting moment of, and I smiled, and he's like, "Why are you smiling, Dad?" And I said, "I just freaking love you, man. I love you so much." And I tell you what, that negative thought carries so much gratitude and so much weight in my life. I practice negative visualization constantly. Because I am grateful. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, it brings you into the present moment, because a lot of time people are far too convinced, because one of my mentors said this to me. He said, people are so focused, they think that the future is going to be better. So if the future is going to be better, that means the now is worse.
Yep.
And
That's so
it's
true.
like, yeah, it's like, so you bring yourself to the present moment and be grateful for what you have right now. And yes, the future might be better, but it's like anything. Will you feel better when you have that new house, that new car, that? Yeah, you might feel better for a moment, but after the novelty wears off, it's the same. You're just back to trying to fulfill that need of, feeling better. When if you can use another technique that you use is mindfulness meditation or the negative visualization, and get present in the moment, and be grateful for where you are and what you have. Because, your view, I take it, because what you've said is that you're grateful for everything that's happened,
I am.
in your life.
I am.
And I look at it that as well. It's like, because I'm a kind of believer that life's happening for us, and everything that's happened is for the benefit of us to grow. And these difficult things are difficult things to deal with, but we grow from them and we evolve from them. And if we can look at it, like you said, the reframing, then we can actually take a lot from that, but we can also actually feel happier and feel better within ourselves, rather than always searching, constantly searching.
We talk about the difference between happiness and peace. I hear a lot of people talk about this, and even the Stoics and the great philosophers in the past talked about this illusion of happiness. That maybe men are more like this, especially young men, with the fast cars and the girlfriend that's beautiful, the watch, the Rolex watch, the wads of hundreds, and you get to that point where maybe you achieve that, and then you look out and you see another mountain that's taller than the one you're standing on, and you're like, well, shit, I'm not good enough. I got to get to that mountain. And then you get to that mountain and you look over and there's another one, and you just always play this hedonic treadmill where you're just this cycle just of never being at peace, which is just a completely different mindset than joy, than happiness. And so I don't want to be happy. Money can buy me happiness. I don't want that. I want peace and joy, and to feel a sense of contentment, not where I'm lazy, but just not even where I feel like I made it. Like I'm tired of that. I made it the day Seth died. I was patting myself on the back, and then look what happened. Boom. I didn't make it all of a sudden. So I don't want to get to that point again. I'm never going to pat myself on the back. I'm never going to be happy or satisfied where I'm at. I'm always going to be striving to get to that other mountain. Yet I want to enjoy the ride. I want to have peaceful moments along the way. That's that balance between trying to be competitive and a high achiever, growth mindset, but not the sacrifice of living in the moment and finding peace and joy. I do think we as humans can attain both simultaneously each day.
100%. Now, for the parents out there that have been listening to this, and because addiction, we all know it's not just an individual thing. The family is involved. The family gets impacted, and now see this teen substance abuse. The problem's becoming gigantic. So, what would you suggest for parents when it comes to understand what's going on, with the teenagers? Because it can be like, it's walking a tightrope. You want them to be safe, okay, but you want them to figuring out the right approach, because there's many. I've done so much research on this, and there's different views of it, because some of the data suggests that parents who constantly just go for total abstinence,
Hmm.
under the legal limit, or you get some of them that talk about, like the Europeans, oh, we'll try a little bit of sip of this, when
Yeah.
really the Europeans have got the highest rate of alcoholics. What would you suggest? You know, because I've heard you speak about it in some of your other podcasts about when you look at families, what could come for them when you see these new children, your friends,
Yeah.
your colleagues,
Yep.
what could come from them. What would you suggest to the parents there? How do you deal with this? How do you tackle it? How do you look out for it? What would you do?
Well, my first observation of this whole thing is you cannot have these conversations too young. And some of this is just slowly indoctrination to a mindset of resiliency, because most kids today don't have that sense of resiliency. Like you said, they play the victim card. They're constantly reminded that they're underachieving versus what they're seeing on social media. Everyone's
Yeah,
succeeding and all that. So I think you can have these conversations with the young kids. And I would also delay access to cell phones. I mean, social media, let's say you can have a cell phone. Um, I would delay access to the cell phone social media aspect as much as I could. That'd be like the number one thing I would do. Delay that as late as you can, because that seems to be, especially with young women today, that seems to be where a lot of the issues start is access to social media. So your son or daughter can have a cell phone, but then just really limit what they can and can't get on to a certain point. Then at some point, you're just at the mercy of the laws of nature as well. You can do everything correct. You can do everything correct. In other words, don't feel shame and guilt, but your son or daughter may end up going down that road that Seth went down. I don't think I did anything wrong with trying to be a good dad to Seth, a good father, a good influence to Seth. I coached him. We did all the right things. I did the tough love. I did I enabled, I remember on a fishing trip in Minnesota, I had my first beer with him. What dad doesn't want to crack his first beer with his son? That's kind of like a rite of passage,
yeah,
But now looking back at that moment, I was probably too young, and was I a bad dad? Well, in hindsight, we're always right. But I think for parents, my advice would be have these conversations, be as honest and authentic as you possibly can. I mean, knowing that they see you as fallible, that they see you as having a drinking issue, or parents that smoke and they hide it from their kids. Their kids know. I mean, really,
yeah,
you don't think your kid knows you smoke, and you've got a can of a beer out on the deck with cigarette butts in it, and you smell like cigarette. I mean, come on, really? Then you're just lying to them, and then they're going to not believe anything else you say, and so lies just beget more lies. And it's like, these are things we can start doing. You want to be a good influence on your kid? You be a good influence on the person looking back in the mirror. That's the first person you need to be a good influence with.
I
You get
love it.
that game won, the rest of it gets easier. It doesn't get a guarantee that your son won't die from fentanyl, but it lowers the chances. And along the way, you have a lot more enjoyable life. And so it's like, I think it starts with us. I think as adults, it's like, we spend so much time in trying to project the perfect life on our kids, but our own life is a train wreck. Fix our train first, and then worry about getting our kids on that train,
Like you say in the book, about the being the on the aeroplane, the mask drops down.
Yeah, so
You
true.
know, it's
So true.
look after yourself first, because that is so true. They look at you, and if you're telling them to do something and you're doing what you're telling them not to do, you're becoming a bit of a hypocrite. And do you think that conversation should be a regular conversation with them? Talk about
I
bringing
think
this up
there's moments. I
and
think there's
having it,
teaching
maybe not like
moments.
every week, but
If
not
you're
just
at
a
a place
one-time
and an
thing.
adult is drunk, that's a great time to use that as an opportunity to talk about alcohol, talk about the problems of alcohol. If they have a friend that got drunk driving or something that's in high school, that's a good time to pull them aside and talk about that. I think being honest with your kids is the most important thing. I mean, certainly there's things that you're not honest 100% of, but if your kid asks you, "Hey, Dad, did you ever smoke pot?" and you smoked a lot of it, why would you lie? What's the benefit of lying? You know, yeah, I did. And you know what? I learned from that experience. I learned I didn't need it. Boom. There's a life moment. There's a teaching moment. Instead of lying to the kid, And as you get older, maybe you reveal the lie. Maybe you said, well, I told you when you were 12, I didn't smoke pot. Well, I actually did. They knew. Your parents kids can tell when you lie to them. But why do we have to lie to kids all the time to protect things from them? And then we want them to avoid those things later on. And maybe that's why you lie. But I think that becomes a problem personally. So I've always tried to be honest with the boys. I went on and I know we're kind of running out of time here. But I'm going to get you on my show for sure. And we can continue this dialogue. And I think we could have another hour and a half talk easily. But I do want to just say one thing. I went on a psychedelic assisted therapy retreat in February. And I've never even smoked pot my entire life. I've never done drugs. I've been drunk for 34 years. My brain cells have never been high. They've been drunk. But I got invited from an individual that I trust immensely. He has a healing ranch, huge healing ranch. And he's offering these services to help people get through and deal with trauma and life and things like that. So I was offered to go. I went through. I did, to think I took a needle shot of ketamine after losing my son with a needle shot of heroin. That's a tough thing for me to work on. Am I letting Seth down and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I went for my own well-being. I didn't go. I'm not opening up ketamine clinics. I'm not advocating for psychedelics. I went, Lachlan, because I was in a really dark place last February. I got invited by someone I trust. The environment was very clinical, very well done for what it could be. And my experience was life-changing for me, absolutely life-changing. I would love to take my two boys to go to something like this, experience the plant medicine. So all I'm simply saying is I have an open mind. I want to live to be 200 years old. I want people to improve their lives. I want people to stop dying. The current way we're doing the system, the Western way of doing medicine, isn't working. It's not working. I'm not recommending people do that. But what I'm saying is it opened my eyes that there are other alternatives out there that have been being used way before we were a country. The indigenous people were using plants to help them with things a long time ago. The war on drugs has been a disaster. It's been one of the reasons why we have the problem. Prohibition didn't work. Why do we think the war on drugs is going to work? It's not. It never has. I'm not saying let's legalize drugs. That's not what I'm saying. People need to kind of understand my motivation behind this. I'm about improving the well-being of human beings. If 100 people go on these retreats and 98 of them have good experiences, what am I missing? I mean, and again, the evidence is overwhelming that people that go on these retreats that are done the right way, they come back better people. Some don't, certainly. But I also can tell you people that take, lorazepam and Xanax and Adderall, and all the other things that we take for mental health. I can show you enough people that, suicidal ideation, all these suicide attempts, all these things can go up with some of these antidepressants. So I don't want someone to tell me to cherry pick the data, but the reality is if we're not open-minded, there's brainwave technology opportunities out there now. There's ways that we can identify brainwave patterns in young children that can potentially tell us that they have a predisposition to become alcoholics someday. Why wouldn't we explore these things? I'm baffled.
It's crazy. And I'm all, see what you're talking, plant medicine. I've researched it for a couple of years now, and I'm all for it because it's the intention you're going in with it. You're not going in there 100%. To get high.
Good point.
You're going in there to
Thanks
heal.
for saying that, because I'm happy you said that, because I didn't go there to get high. I've never been high. I went there because I was struggling with grief and trauma and suffering and pain. All the things I talk about that I have conquered, I don't. I deal with it every day. And I just thought, another arrow in my quiver. What's the harm? And so you're right. I didn't go there to get high, and I didn't feel addicted. I went again in June. So I've gone twice in like the last year. I never once felt like I had to go back and do it again. That's the crazy thing about the plants. I didn't feel addicted.
No, and because a guy Aubrey Marcus talks a lot about it, and he's been on his own healing journey. He's done a lot of them, but there's so much evidence now and people trying the plant medicine. I just think it's, and I know there's probably reasons that big pharma and all this don't want this because it's going to eradicate all of these synthetic drugs and all this other stuff.
They're already going to get on board, though. That's the thing, Lachlan. The big pharma is already trying to patent a certain molecule that they're changing in psilocybin to go ahead and have their own equivalent of what people are doing now. I mean, You're right. I said the same thing. I said, well, Big Pharma is going to be against it. The reality is Big Pharma is going to be the biggest supporter of this because they can
Wow.
see this as another way to, yeah, exactly. And I once Big Pharma gets involved, what's been the track record of Big Pharma?
Yeah,
It's been
destruction.
abysmal. Yeah. So, I
Just,
mean, that's a big red flag to me. And I don't know what the psychedelic industry has a very difficult task in trying to, you're not going to keep Big Pharma out of it. There's too much money. But how do you do it without, ruining a good thing, potentially a good thing?
well, that's it. It's they've been like indigenous people. They've been doing it for hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
years in a certain way, and ayahuasca is the one that I want to try.
Yeah.
I want to go on an
Me too.
ayahuasca
I haven't done.
retreat.
Maybe you and I will go on. Maybe you and I need to go on a retreat together.
Oh, that would be amazing. It really would, because I've been wanting to do it, and like I've had a spiritual awakening a couple of must be 4 years ago now, and since that, my whole life has just transformed in the way I look at
Me
things.
too.
And and that's what I think people get confused when they talk about spirituality. They get it confused with religion.
Yeah.
And I don't think spirituality is anything to do with religion. I think spirituality is the relationship with yourself. And
Amen. I agree with that 100%.
and so it's for me wanting to understand me. And so that's why these things appeal to me, because ayahuasca, I don't think it's something that's pleasurable at the time. I think you'd be sick and stuff like
Right.
that. But I think the healing benefits from it and what you're shown is what you need to see at that moment in time, which will help you
Yeah.
become a better human being and help you deal with these things that you're struggling with. So I'm all for
Right.
plant medicine, and even my wife, she's against drugs in a big way because of my past, but she's okay with that. She's okay
Yeah.
with me looking at that, and she's on board because I've explained it to her that it's not me going to get high, it's me to go get healed, and
Yeah.
it's only going to benefit us as we go down the line. So, and I think it's important for people to understand that it's not about the high, it's about
Right.
what that can do for me as a human going forward, because my purpose in life is to be of service, just like yours. And if I can, understand me better, then I can understand others better. And if I can
Mm-hmm.
overcome what's held me back, then I can help others overcome what's holding them back. So it's just, again, it's awareness. And that's what this whole journey for me about is being aware of what's not working for me. How do I overcome it so I can help someone else overcome it?
I think you and I probably listen to the same podcast, but I was listening to a gentleman who went on a psychedelic assisted treatment, like therapy retreat. And he said, the difference is that when you do a drug, it locks the door. It buries. You're escaping dealing with the
Yeah.
cause. When you do psychedelics, it unlocks the door. You sit in it. You deal with it. It comes to you, but it comes to you from a different lens, not of anger, fear, and desperation, but it comes from learning and curiosity and connection and love. And so I'm agnostic. So I'm not I'm not a believer at all personally, but I'm very spiritual. I'm as spiritual as any human on the planet. My psychedelic assisted therapy journey was the most spiritual, amazing thing I ever have. The moment my ego really quieted, they call it an ego death, but your ego doesn't die; it just gets quieted.
Yeah,
was the most impactful thing in my entire lifetime, and it literally changed my life. I look at every single animal differently. I look at trees differently. I look at fish differently. I feel connected. I don't feel better than anyone. I don't feel worse than anyone. I feel equal with you, Lachlan. I don't
yeah,
feel older. I don't feel male or female. I just feel connected from the most purest spiritual element that I possibly can. It has nothing to do with religion. Zero to do with me feeling like I'm under somebody as a servant. And if I don't do X, I go to heaven or hell. It's like, I never felt that. I felt a presence of something. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if my neurons just shot some way that the plants, tricked me. Who really freaking cares? Who cares? If my life benefited, I feel better. I'm a better human being. If there really is a God and that was my moment I met him, or if it was my neurons just flashing memories in my brain, I'm a better human being.
yeah. And
I'll
it's
find out
wholeness,
when I
isn't it?
die. If all that's true. But right now, my experience was great, and I'm still going to keep ratcheting up my experience with this. I'm still going to keep learning about it. And I've never talked about this on my podcast, by the way, ever.
Oh, brilliant.
But I felt comfortable on yours because it's not
I'm
my
glad.
podcast. But I'm relaunching my podcast for first of the year, new studio, new everything. And I think one of my first shows I'm going to talk about is my psychedelic journey. And
Great.
I'm not going to promote it. I'm just going to share. And then people can
Well,
say for themselves, I'm
yeah,
uncomfortable with it. Well, okay. Then
I think
power
that's
to
the
you.
thing is it's letting people know, and that's why the whole thing of my podcast is just to bring awareness to different topics that to help people reinvent their life. And if psilocybin, ketamine can do that, because it's these new psychedelic, these journeys, they're helping treat PTSD, they're helping treat various different things, addiction.
Yep.
There's so much research now, so why not talk about it? And that's the way I see it. And like you said there, the death of the ego. I know it's not the ego death, but I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm reading a
Quiet.
book right now called The New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Oh yeah.
I've had the
I
book
know
for
who he is. Yep.
I've had the book for about 3 years, and I've tried to read it a couple of times, and I've not been able to. But it was the same with The Power of Now, his first book, exact same experience. And now I'm starting to read it, and it's all about the ego. And I can read it this time. It's like I'm taking the knowledge in, and I think just before I wasn't ready to hear the words, but now I'm ready to hear it, and I'm not even that far into it, but it's just it's like getting me to look at things and how I'm living my life, because I used to always had to be right.
Me too.
I had to be right, and I never took responsibility. I was never at fault. It was always somebody else's fault. And
Yep.
now I can easily be wrong, and I can, even if I'm right, I don't even argue back, and
Yeah.
I can see how I've shifted so much. So it's like, this new Lachlan, as I like to say, I love this guy, because the old version, I used to hate him.
Me too. Not
And
you. I didn't hate you, Lachlan. I hated
no,
me.
but I know exactly what you mean. It's just that it's like, this is what it is. It's learning to love yourself, because if you can love yourself, you can love others. But if you can't love
Right.
yourself, you find it difficult to love other people. And I think this is where the world, what you spoke about is that connection, which is wholeness. It's like, because we are all connected on a unified field. And
We are.
when you're harming others, you're harming yourself. And I explained karma to my daughter last night, because she'd said something nasty about another person, and I explained to her about karma, and that's not a nice way to speak. But I was trying to get her to understand that we are all one. This whole world, we are all connected in one way or another. So if you're harming others, it will be done back to you in some way, and you will, there'll be something that would happen to you because you've done something there. And I don't know if that's true or whatever, but that's just what I believe. That's what I believe. So, Jeff, what has been the biggest books for you in terms of your growth? What would you say has been the biggest books for you?
Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl was the one
I
that
love it.
really introduced me to that whole idea of suffering and the woe is me mindset, and how we choose our attitude. You can't choose your you can at some point, but he couldn't when he was in the concentration. But he could choose. He could choose everything from how he interacted with other prisoners to how he interacted with the guards. Even though he was mistreated, he still could choose how he interacted. And he really believes, even though he understood that there's a lot of luck, some of the prisoners are just randomly killed. He just believes in his heart that his mindset there, his attitude, is one of the reasons why he was able to get out, and not just get out, but flourish for many years afterwards. But that's the book that I would put up there. I've read hundreds. My book thing back here is
I can
full.
see that.
I like Sam Harris. Sam Harris is one of my favorite authors and philosophers out there. I use his Waking Up app for meditation, and I like Sam. Some people don't, but I've learned a lot from him on a lot of different topics. So anything Sam Harris related, I really like. I don't know, all the other guys out there, I try to listen. Like I listen to Rich Roll's podcast, Joe Rogan. I'll just scroll through and find people that I kind of want to learn about. I would listen to his podcast. I like Scott Barry Kaufman's podcast, the psychology podcast. That's really good. A new one I listen to that's been really good that I like is the Radically Genuine podcast with Dr. Roger McFillin.
Oh, I'll
And
need to look at that.
it's really, really good. And it's right down my wheelhouse. Every episode's on teen and Gen Z mental health. It's on antidepressants. It's on everything that I'm trying to become an expert in, some podcasts I listen to just to widen my knowledge level, but his podcast is like, I listen to it when I work out because I'll be running on my elliptical and he'll say something. I'll run right down to my notes here in my studio, run back to my elliptical. So it's like, I get a lot of really good ideas for blogs and for content, things like that from the podcasts that I listen to. So I try to change it up. I'm not always listening to very serious podcasts all the time. And, that's kind of what I like to do. I don't really read as much as I used to because podcasts have kind of replaced that for me.
Yeah, I'm the same. When I was listening to your book, I've got, cause it was on Audible, so I had the notes section, and that's why I was stopping it, sticking the note in, so I could go back and replay it and re-listen to it, because there was a lot of gold nuggets. But I'm much the same as yourself when it comes to books, and there's many different ones out there. But A Man's Search for Meaning was a very, a very eye-opening book for me, because if I thought if my life was difficult, then this guy here, was
right.
If he
I did
if
the
he
same
can
thing.
yeah. So it's great. So Jeff, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to touch on, or you would like to speak about before
No,
we
I will
wrap it
tell you
up?
this. I will tell you that this is the longest I've ever been on a podcast. I've never had a guest on my show in 3 years ever go this long. So that just tells you how good our conversation was. And what I'd like to do is extend an offer for you to come on my podcast early in January, because I'm going to be, like I said, relaunching, rebranding. We're trying to get everything really intentional to focus on youth mental wellness. And so my podcast will have conversations more geared towards that and less about, me and my story. And so that's what I'm doing. But no, I think if people want to get my book, that's great. It's on Audible. I did it myself over a few months. It's called This One's for You: An Inspirational Journey Through Addiction, Death, and Meaning. And I told the producer when I recorded in the studio, I said, A, I have to have it in my voice. No one can repeat the story in not my voice. And B, when I'm not feeling it, I'm out of the studio. And there's times where I was reading and I felt hurried or rushed, and I thought, I'm not doing this to get it done. I'm doing it to do it so it's authentic and genuine. So it took me a few months to do it, but I enjoy doing it. So the podcast is coming out new, and then the Brighton app, again, it's BRIGHTN. So it's Brighton app, and if you go to Android or Apple on the store, the Apple Store, whatever it's called, App Store, and type in Brighton Wellness, so BRIGHTN Wellness, and then you can put a link on it as well, Lachlan, to help people. And again, it's free for kids right now. Yeah, it's free for kids, and it's our MVP version, so it's like our first version, so it's a little clunky, and we are constantly upgrading it. So some of the videos that you may see right now, like a week, will be completely off, and you'll have higher quality videos on there. So we're trying to make it engaging for kids at the same time.
Yeah.
So
I think the app's
thanks for
great.
the opportunity. I really appreciate this.
No, Jeff, thanks for coming on, because it's not just that. The app's amazing and the book's amazing. Just to give you credit for that, because even listening to it, I've listened to a lot of Audible books, and the way you spoke in it, you could definitely feel the connection in there. That this was something for you. The app is amazing. I'm not just saying that, but I will have links for everything here. But also just a couple of other things that you've got, because you've got the Don't Start initiative as well, and Choices Network. You've got these two things going. So what, if we don't mind, can you just give us a wee overview of what these are, Jeff, so if people can come and support?
Yeah, the Don't Start initiative is just an idea that I came up with that's kind of similar to all the prevention based methods that are out there. And this actually kind of came as a vision in my mind when I was sleeping. And I took the acronym ABC, and I thought, well, if I'm going to talk to kids, ABC is a really nice acronym because it's educational. So the three parts of the Don't Start initiative are: A is awareness. So tell the young adult that they have to be aware that they're in a situation that mom and dad always talked about, the situation that your older brother talked about. It's like you need to be aware. Second B, the B in ABC is breathing. So take a few seconds, breathe through your nose. And the reason why you do your nose is you can't talk. So I ask people in class when we're there, I want you to breathe through your nose. I want you to take a deep breath through your nose and talk. It's like literally impossible. So if you breathe through your mouth, you can talk at the same time. And so kids want to just start chattering like, you're trying to make up an excuse why you don't want to smoke vape or whatever. Just take a deep breath. It could be 2 seconds. It could be 1. It could be 10. And that gives you your brain just a second to recalibrate, to go back to that awareness moment. So you're not going to say something you're going to regret. And then C stands for choose. Just make your choice. And again, it's that, not the right or wrong road, but the better or bitter road. The bitter road is drugs, alcohol, all that comes with it. The better road is just saying, hey, you know what? I'm not today, maybe. And I'm trying to teach kids that maybe if you're not comfortable just telling the truth, like I don't want to do drugs, just say that you're on a medication that your parents gave you or something, or say that your dad's picking you up in 20 minutes, or, just something quick on your feet that you can practice a couple excuses, have those ready. And that's the idea behind that ABC mindset. And then the Choices Network now is actually the Living Undeterred Project. That's my nonprofit. So I'm not as active in that. I am the president. We have a board, but I should be more active. And I think one of my goals next year is to kind of redefine the purpose of the nonprofit and do a little bit better job raising money. But yeah, I got a lot on my plate, but I like it. I sold my investment company this summer that I founded when I was 23. Yeah, I don't do that anymore. I hadn't actually worked for a couple of years, but decided I just wanted to get out of it. So, I never even asked my business partner what I sold it for. I just said, I'm out. I want to work on mental health for kids. And that's what I did.
Well, listen,
yeah,
that's
so
amazing.
I still to this day don't know exactly what I sold it for, but I have enough. I don't have FU money, but I have enough where I'm okay. But I got to figure out a way to some of my ventures I'm doing, find a way to make a living on it, like everyone does in this industry. There's no shame in making money and being an advocate. Many people do it. Tony Robbins does it. Oprah does it. I mean, a lot of people do it.
The thing is, Jeff, it takes your time, your energy. It takes you a lot to do this, and I think maybe people might not understand that. But you're giving your all to do this. Like, I watched all your blogs, and every one of them were great. Every one of them, we've got 16 on there, and just to do that for 10, 15, 7 minutes, whatever. But then there's all the other uploads that you've done, and then the traveling. There's so much involved there that there's definitely, you have to be, you're rewarded with the value you provide, and you're providing a lot of value, and it's only going to increase. So I would love to be on your podcast. I couldn't think of anybody else better that I would like to be on the podcast. So, I'm excited for that. And if there's anything that I can do over here to support your mission, I'm all on board with you there. So anything whatsoever, you let me know, and I will do whatever I can to support, brother.
Well, I'll get the invite out to you. And again, thank you very much for this conversation. At almost 2 hours, but sometimes it felt like it was 15 minutes, and that's when you have a deep, good conversation. I have to think anybody that watches this or listens to this podcast, if you can't walk away from this feeling a little bit better, then you might as well not watch any podcasts or read any book or listen to anybody ever again, because this is a very uplifting conversation, even though it got dark and deep. But at the end of it, keep living undeterred, like I say. And, you can be a victim or a victor. It's your choice.
Exactly. It's your choice. And we'll leave it on that. And Jeff, once again, thanks again. I really, truly appreciate your time and also your vulnerability and honesty. It was amazing to have you on.
I appreciate it, man. Love you like a brother, and we're going to eventually meet someday, I promise.
I just want to close with a big, massive thank you. See, Project Reinvented has never been about me. It's always been about you, the listener who's looking to improve their life. So with that, I just want to express my sincere gratitude to each and every one of you for not only listening, but your continued support. Project Reinvented wouldn't exist without your presence, so thank you. My goal is to make this as personal to you as possible. So your feedback is invaluable to me, always welcomed and always appreciated. So as we go on this journey together, remember the art of reinvention doesn't always demand big, massive leaps. See, big change starts with small steps. So think about this. What's one small action you can take today that will reignite your journey of life reinvention? Make that decision to take that step. See, life's a canvas, reinvention's the art, and you're the artist. So start creating. See you next week.